all of your evidence-based writing, but it's specifically required in that end of course exam part A, the question 2. So when we talk about what we're going to learn today, as the title page suggests, we're going to review some terms. And I'm going to continue to use the word review because I think you've already heard most of these terms, and maybe you're just not connecting them to the line of reasoning analysis. All right. So we're going to review some terms. When you're analyzing line of reasoning, it's two parts, right? And this is in the instruction, it's in the prompt. A thorough explanation of the author's line of reasoning requires, number one, identifying relevant claims. Those are the author's claims. And then number two, clearly explaining the connections among them, right? So there are two parts. And what I want you to understand is those connections are the same in all arguments. All arguments, the arguments you write and the arguments that we're asking you to analyze, all have similar parts. And some of those connections could be basically the parts of a classic argument. They could be perspectives. They could be the various patterns of development. Those connections, the ones that we're asking you to analyze, are the same connections you've been making in your own arguments. Just like the parts of classic argument are universal and timeless, so is the need to consider complex issues from multiple perspectives. And so are the methods writers use to develop those arguments. To effectively analyze line of reasoning, you just need to apply what you've been using to construct arguments to their deconstruction. For instance, you know the parts of a classic argument. We've gone over those. This isn't anything new. You've probably known this since elementary school. They have an introduction. They have background information. They have a confirmation. They have counter argument and a refutation, maybe a rebuttal, right? And then there's a conclusion. Most arguments are going to be comprised of those components of a classic argument. So you can anticipate those parts and you can point them out as part of your analysis. You already know that recognizing these parts is less about placement and more about purpose. But at the beginning of the article, when the author claims that the problem or issue is significant because of its effects, just say that's happening in the introduction. The parts of a classic argument can serve as connections among those minor claims. There's other things that you already know too. You already know that a complex issue should be considered from multiple perspectives. So when a minor claim introduces a different one, or presents an opposing one, or proposes an alternate one, just point that out. Point out that that's a perspective, a point of view conveyed through an argument from a different stakeholder, from an expert in another field, from a different discipline, from a different demographic category, right? From a different gender, or maybe from a different region altogether. So one talks about the Southwest and one talks about the Northwest. Those are perspectives, point of views conveyed through an argument from different perspectives, right? So all you're doing is using the things that you already know. So just like you arranged the guests at your dinner party, remember the dinner party, to support the conversation. You put them together. The perspectives in this argument, in the argument, in any argument, those were arranged as well. So when you recognize that intentional placement, you can explain the connections between the minor claims. Let's look at another one. This might be a little newish. I want you to bear with me. But arguments are developed using tried and true methods or modes, if you want, like to use a flashy term. Whole arguments are often identified as one of these patterns. So you've likely already written more than your fair share of personal narratives. If you haven't already, by the time you're in college, you'll likely have written a definition essay or a classification division essay. But these same methods are used to develop parts or sections of arguments. So when you recognize a minor claim and see that it establishes a cause and effect relationship, point that out as part of your analysis of the line of reasoning. And when the next claim gives you an example or a description of that cause and effect, call it an example or a description. All I'm saying is you just need some language. You just need some language to go along with your analysis. What I'd like to do now is just try to anticipate the ways that you might see these connections as you work your way through any argument. Okay, so let's just do that together. Okay, so you already know that the purpose of the introduction is to get and keep the audience's attention. And there's some different ways that an author might do that. There are different ways that you might have done that in one of your arguments for this class. One way is to make the topic relatable, so that the author might have shared anecdotes or narratives. Anecdotes are just brief narratives. So when you see that it's an anecdote or a narrative, say that the minor claim presents an anecdote or it presents a narrative from a particular maybe stakeholder's perspective. So just use that language when you're analyzing the line of reasoning. Just point it out that that's what it is, because you recognize it, because you are using those same things in your own arguments. In the introduction, the author might try to establish a sense of urgency, right? And they might do that by giving statistics from experts. And when you notice that that's an expert, and you notice that that's an expert in a particular field, point that out. Say an expert in environmental science, right? Because then you're pointing out, you're showing that you understand that that's the connection. The connection is this person is an expert in a particular field. They might also establish a sense of urgency by including some dramatic descriptions. Well, a description is a pattern of development. So just point out that the minor claim describes, right? Just use that language. We're not going to go through all of these in turn, but but you can come back to this. Let's look at some background information. Like, we know that the background information gets the reader and the author on the same page, right? Make sure that we can agree on certain things. So one of the things that they might do in the background information is to define key terms. So when you see that definition, point out that the minor claim defines, right? So you're just using language that you already have as part of your analysis of line of reasoning. You're just using language to explain the connections among the minor claims. So you know that you have to establish context and significance of a problem or issue, right? So when you see that the author is establishing context and significance, say that. That's part of the connection of the connection between the minor claims that help to establish your line of reasoning. Okay, same thing's true. For the counter argument or the refutation rebuttal section, right? So they're probably going to acknowledge some opposing viewpoints. You can recognize that as maybe comparison and maybe contrast. Whatever it is, you know comparison, contrast. You've been doing that since you've been doing Venn diagrams as a wee child. Just point out that it's a comparison or a contrast. Likely, in the counter argument, they might even mention some alternative solutions. So when you see, because we expect alternative solutions in a problem solution essay. So when you see the alternative solutions, just say that's what they are. The idea is that you're using language that you already have to help make the connections between the minor claims more clear in your analysis of the line of reasoning. The confirmation is where the writer really develops the case. And there's going to be a lot of minor claims in there. As you're working through those minor claims, pay attention to what are the perspectives that are being presented in there. Is he using a particular pattern of development, a particular way of developing the argument in that minor claim? And as you work your way through, just point them out. I don't want you to think you have to memorize them. That's not the idea. The idea is not memorization. The idea is not let me list off every single one of them. The idea is those are the things that are going to be in there. So when you see them, say you see them. Let's get to the conclusion, right? Might as well. So how convenient. Here we are at the conclusion. You're going to bring the argument. The conclusion brings the argument to a satisfying close. And sometimes they do that by explaining the positive consequence of accepting the argument. Well, those positive consequences of accepting the argument are just cause effect. So when you see that it's going to cause an effect, just point out if you accept if you accept the argument, then it's going to have this effect. The same is true for the negative consequences. If you reject my argument, it's going to have these negative. That's a cause effect relationship. They might also offer a solution. So if they offer a solution, say you recognize it as a solution, that their minor claim presents a solution. Another thing they might do in the conclusion is like some kind of a call to action or a call to thought. And if they spell out the steps of how to do that, then that might be process analysis. If it is, and you remember that term, or even if you just say it goes through the process, that's good enough. It's not about memorizing the language, the terms. It's about recognizing that all arguments are made up of the same components, and the connections, that some of the language that you can use to make the connections help to support your analysis of the line of reasoning. What do I want you to take away? That you don't have to memorize them. I don't want you to take a quiz on these tomorrow. I want you to understand that the line of reasoning, analyzing line of reasoning requires two things. The first one is just making sure you can identify the claims. But after you've identified the claims, you need to explain the connections. And I'm hoping to give you some reassurance, some encouragement that you already have a lot of language that explains the connections. You just need to use it in this context. So connections are the same in all arguments. The parts of a classic argument are going to be the same. That an argument is going to consider it from multiple perspectives, that's going to be in there. And then that they're going to use particular ways to develop their argument, that's going to be the same. When you see it, say something, right? I like to think of it myself as like, I see what you're doing and I'm going to call you on it. Like I see it and I'm going to point it out. I recognize that strategy. I recognize what you're doing in this argument. Okay, I hope that you're a little empowered on line of reasoning as far as just some of the language that you already have. I really appreciate you spending your time with me. Thank you.